Late last year, I wanted to do a series of Spinosaurus reviews that would end with a P&SO. It didn't work out because this GR Toys, which would have preceded that, arrived too late. But I was happy with it. GR Toys offered two color variants, a green and a brown. The brown looked suspiciously like the Peppo Unlimited edition, and I had no doubt the real paint job would look nothing like it. A friend sent me this in-hand image, proving it. The green still looked pretty okay, so I ordered it. Though there's still a fall-off in paint application, overall it still looks good. But when GR Toys announced its Carcharodontosaurus, again with two variants, I was excited. Now one, the flame version was more conservative. The other, the blue, clearly ridiculously complex. I knew it would never look like that for the low price, but out of curiosity, I ordered it anyway, just to see what happened. And here, right off, it's indeed not like the product images, but the fall-off isn't as wide as with the Spinosaurus. There's a general smooth opalescence that's missing in the actual model. It loses complexity, especially here in the torso, the arms, and missing some green and yellow tints, as well as the white patterning on the flank. But it's captured the general idea very nicely. Despite the poverty of color in comparison, the color application is very naturally done. And even though I've seen what it could be, I'm very happy with what it actually is. In fact, it's the first good Carcharodontosaurus I have, which doesn't say much since I've only ever had this monstrosity. And I won't bother comparing them for obvious reasons. Just a brief background on Carcharodontosaurus. When I was a kid, T-Rex was considered the biggest predator of them all. Now since then, even the general public has an increased awareness of contenders for that accolade. There's Giganotosaurus, Spinosaurus, then there's Carcharodontosaurus. But as I learned more about dinosaurs, I realized many wild claims were in fact based on very fragmentary material. The original find by Stromer included just 3 vertebrae, a very damaged skull, and a broken femur estimated to be 1.26 meters, and that was lost during a World War II bombing, which was also the sad fate that befell another famous Stromer find, Spinosaurus. A neotype was designated by Bruzzati and Sereno in 2007. You could get a true idea just how little we have if you look at these reconstructions by Frenois on DeviantArt. Because of all this, estimated sizes are controversial. Assuming Carcharodontosaurus saharicus, I've seen estimates between 12 and 14 meters, that's 39 to 45 feet. Terrian and Henderson in 2007, using an allometric extrapolation from skull size, put it right in the middle, at 13 meters, that's 43 feet. But since we don't have the full skull, that's really extrapolating from an extrapolation. Dr. Larramendi, whose name you might recognize from this book, told me he doesn't believe in allometric equations. Instead, he extrapolates from more complete relatives or phylogenetic bracketing, arriving at about 12.7 meters. And even then, that was based on the whole type of Giganotosaurus, which reported femur length of 143 centimeters has since been reduced to 136.5 centimeters. So Dr. Larramendi reckons now that the length would be barely over 12 meters, or even less. So reports of the demise of T-Rex as biggest and baddest at the hands of Carcharodontosaurus have been grossly exaggerated. Now this model is 36 centimeters, that's 14 inches. So assuming a length of 12 to 13 meters, I'll say this puts the scale of this model from 1 to 33 to 1 to 36. Now let's look at the head. the actual shape is going to be speculative because we don't have enough of the skull. So there'll always be some educated inference. For example, Frenois on DeviantArt in his reconstruction used Tyrannotitan for the rear of the skull, and Acrocanthosaurus for the rest. Other artists have also used Giganotosaurus and Mapusaurus. You can see here the relationships between them according to Canali et al. 2014, so it's not beyond reason to fill in with parts from them. By the way, I should say that these paleo artists put in a lot of effort into their art and research, so please visit their pages on DeviantArt and consider buying some of the prints and premium downloads. I do that from time to time and I've always been pleased. Based on most reconstructions, this model has the same general shape. From the front, you'll also see the narrowness of the head. Happily, the head isn't shrink-wrapped, with some areas where the bone is reasonably subcutaneous. The detail is really very good. Now just look at the facial scales and the detail on these keratinized crests. As we travel down the jaw and the neck, you can see how the scales become more minute and exquisite. And details like these neck creases and veins are very subtly sculpted, with islands of tiny scales between them. I do have a couple of issues. Now first, the jaw is articulated, but unfortunately, at least in mine, it doesn't fully close. Which is a pity because without being able to do that, you really can't appreciate the presence of lips, as you'll see if I were to force it closed. Now second, for some weird reason, the jaw is quite noticeably of a much lighter shade than the rest of the animal. On the right side, because you have more white in the throat, it's less noticeable. But here on the left, the whiteness ends lower, so there's a definite discontinuity. The teeth are individually sculpted and vary in size and shape, although they would have been improved by some yellowing to make them look more natural. And on the inside of the mouth, you can admire the detail on the roof, and also the medial sides where you can make out the roots of the teeth. An interesting fact for you. In 2011, paleo artist Bob Nichols created his double death illustration. This got Donald Henderson curious about just how much Carcharodontosaurus might be able to lift without losing balance. He found the constraint to be the neck muscles, and based on this, he estimated a weight of 424 kilograms, that's 930 pounds. So, not so much this, but this more reasonably sized sauropod. But it's still no joke, and the thick neck musculature certainly looks like it has the strength and power possible for a feat like this. Traveling down the animal, you can really appreciate the work that went into sculpting this. I hardly even know where to start, and it's hard to separate the visual effect of the sculpting and the way the coloration just melds into it. I'll just preface by saying that the combined effect of the two can't be separated. For example, just looking at the throat, we see how the combination of scales, veins, and infusion of color creates an effect greater than the sum of its parts. And just keep this in mind as we explore the rest of the model. Now going down from the side of the head, down the neck. I love the pebble-like look of these scales. And as we track down the length of the animal, you see how they vary in size in a very logical manner. Compare the dorsal cervical region here and the dorsal thoracic here. And proceeding from the dorsal to the ventral, the scales decrease in size, down to the tiny scales in the arms, and the fingers, and going back down the flank, the detail is exquisite. Combine this quality sculpt with the way the paint is applied. You can see that regionally, it's one color theme here, here, and again here in the thighs, but the boundaries where they segue into each other is so smooth and seamless. And all this looks very realistic to me. I just love the way the orange here mirrors the orange in these crests here. The GR Toys artists really have the talent it takes to give a mega predator like this due respect. And tracking down the tail, you'll see the same level of care and sculpt and color application. But it's really when you turn it over and have a look at the ventral surface that you realize just how much care has been put into it. The minuscule size of the scales, you'll even see the flank veins continue down and become smaller in the belly region. And if you look at the groin, and indeed any region where you'd expect more movement and hence enfolding of skin, the scales get correspondingly small. Or just look at the fine detail down the legs, where the scales are smaller and the separation grooves more shallow. I just love these blotches of color here. Down the shins, the ankles, to the toes. Now, not casting shade on their previous Spinosaurus, after all, I could argue it simply has a more crocodilian aesthetic with larger scutes. But that aside, the difference in fineness is very clear. The arms are based on other relatives such as Accolade, and they're sufficiently small, in agreement with the general bioplan of megatheropods, which seem to give up killer claws and massive arms for larger heads and a mouthful of teeth. You'll see their small size similarly restored in other carcharodontids as well, such as Giganotosaurus here. The bulk of the torso and tail is, as we've seen, reconstructed, with that kind of a deep belly and obviously large hip bones modeled on other relatives. The thighs are matchingly well muscled to carry the weight of the body. We don't have the feet of Carcharodontosaurus, but based on reconstructions, they do seem a tad large. Now happily, this model actually balances without a base. Now let's just take a look over the length of the body. just to see how all that color ties in together. Now of course, you could order the limited edition 1 to 20th scale GR Toys Carcharodontosaurus made of resin and a whole lot bigger at about 60 centimeters, that's 23.5 inches. And I'm sure for the price, I think it's about £500 or $700, the color reproductions will be more accurate. But for that price, I can buy 15 to 20 PNSOs, so I'll have to pass. Speaking of which, the PNSO Carcharodontosaurus is expected out soon, and not taking anything away from this, I'm really looking forward to that too. Now let's have some comparisons. First, some other Carcharodontosaurus. The Eofauna 1 to 35 scale Giganotosaurus. The 2017 1 to 30th Safari Limited Giganotosaurus. Now a couple of other 1 to 35 scale figures. We have the GR Toys Spinosaurus. They look really good together. Finally, everyone's love-hate favorite, the PNSO 2020 Wilson. So that's it for the GR Toys Carcharodontosaurus. Well, except for a fall-off in paint application as expected, I'm really delighted with it. I think the sculpt is amazing, the colours are sick and complex, far more complex than I expect in a model at this price point. This really throws the gauntlet down to PNSO, and now I'm wondering how they'd execute a T-Rex. And I wouldn't be surprised if all this was just a refinement process before they present the definitive T-Rex. I look forward to their next offering, rumoured to be a Dicraeosaurus. I love sauropods, and it's about time we had a decent new one. So that's all for now. Please let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see you soon, real soon.